You're watching the legal breakdown. So, Glenn, we've got a rare look here, thanks to some exclusive reporting from CNN, into how Jack Smith is planning on prosecuting Donald Trump in the Florida trial. And it includes people who are going to be really dangerous for him. So, can you speak on what Jack Smith is planning here?
Brian, we already had a pretty good idea who some of the witnesses would be in the federal prosecution against Donald Trump down in Florida. But let me just read a little bit of what the CNN reporting revealed about who some of the other witnesses might be, witnesses that I don't think we were necessarily expecting to see as part of this prosecution. They say that among other witnesses, there will be a plumber, a maid, a chauffeur, a woodworker. I don't know if there will be a butcher, a baker, and a candlestick maker as well. But the point of this new reporting is that there will be a whole bunch of Mar-a-Lago employees, people, quite frankly, that Donald Trump probably doesn't even know exist, probably never interacted with. I think it's a fair question. How do you think Donald Trump treats his relatively low-level employees? That's the way the CNN article characterizes these witnesses as low-level employees. How do you think Donald Trump treats them? With kindness, with courtesy, right? With decency? He probably doesn't even know they exist. But guess what? The maids and the plumbers and the woodworkers and the chauffeurs see everything going on in Mar-a-Lago. Let me give you a flavor of what the CNN reporting is about just one of these witnesses, the woodworker. There's a woodworker from South Florida who was installing crown molding in Donald Trump's bedroom because, of course, he was. And he saw all these documents strewn about. And you know what they look like? They look like classified documents. And this woodworker said to himself, they must be movie props. Who in the
Oh my
world
God.
would leave all these highly classified documents strewn about? These are the kind of witnesses, Brian, that are going to crush Donald Trump. But it's not only these sort of Mar-a-Lago employees. The article also sets out some of the other witnesses that are expected to testify are people like Donald Trump's inner circle, including from his time as a businessman, from his time as a political candidate, from his time in the White House. There will be Secret Service agents, there will be intelligence officials, and there will be people who were in the room when he was being recorded showing classified documents about military plans to bomb foreign countries. I mean, the scope and breadth of incriminating witnesses against Donald Trump is spectacular. And I think when and if that case ever goes to trial with Judge Aileen Cannon presiding, I think that's an open question. When and if it goes to trial, Donald Trump is done.
Even the woodworker has enough sense to know that there is no way that anybody should have all of these classified documents strewn about. The only logical explanation could be that it has to be movie props, because no one would be that dumb to leave classified documents strewn about your own bedroom. Uh, to that point, to the point of Donald Trump, what about his response here? Can you speak on that and what it tells you?
His response speaks volume because he instantly erupted all over his third-rate social media platform. And there was this long, unhinged post. I actually urge people to read it. He is lashing out at Jack Smith. He is lashing out at Joe Biden. He calls this reporting fake news. This is CNN breaking fake news. And he also talks again about the Presidential Records Act. I was allowed to do all this. Well, no, he wasn't. But when you get to the end of that extended post by Donald Trump, you can see that this new reporting, I think especially that all of his own low-level employees are prepared to come in and testify as prosecution witnesses. It is really crushing him, and you can tell he is extremely scared at this point.
Okay, well, on that point of the Presidential Records Act, he keeps deferring to this piece of legislation as if it exonerates him. Glenn, please, dear God, explain what the Presidential Records Act is and why it doesn't do what he's claiming it does.
Yeah, I'm not going to do chapter and verse because I don't want to put everybody to sleep. But let me tell you, Brian, what the sure indicator is that he has no viable defense under the Presidential Records Act. Not a single criminal defense attorney representing Donald Trump has said in court or out of court that the Presidential Records Act provides any benefit or any defense to Donald Trump. If it did, if it granted him some kind of a magical unicorn immunity from prosecution, don't you think his attorneys would have been pushing that like all get out on all of the judges? The Presidential Records Act essentially says, yes, there are some records that are the president's property, like if he writes memoirs about his time in the White House. But what it does not provide, because frankly, most of what is generated and most of what passes through the Oval Office as a potential presidential record, it says, is the property of the federal government. And that's why these documents go to the National Archives, because they're not the president's property under the Presidential Records Act. So, it offers him no defense. And it just seems to me this is more of an attempt to put a false narrative out there so he can gin up his base into mimicking, into parroting back Presidential Records Act. You see, it's a witch hunt. They shouldn't be going after Trump at all. Let me send him another $5. That's why Donald Trump continues to spout off this nonsense about the Presidential Records Act.
I mean, it really is amazing the degree of shamelessness, because this is legislation that does the complete polar opposite of what he's claiming it does. That as if it protect. I mean, to your point, the legislation itself lays out very clearly that the only records that would belong to him personally are if he had some type of memoir or a diary that he kept. But all of these documents, obviously, like war plans, the idea that they would be personal mementos for him is just so completely devoid of logic. Glenn, after years of Donald Trump trying to distance himself from his high-level staffers by calling them low-level volunteers, is there not some irony in these low-level staffers now being the ones to ultimately contribute to Trump's downfall in this trial?
Yeah, the fact that the people who kind of populate Mar-a-Lago and do the everyday work, like the hardworking people, the decent people just trying to earn a living, the maids, the chauffeurs, the woodworkers, the plumbers, these are the people who very likely could be the most damaging and the most sharply incriminating witnesses against Donald Trump, because they saw what was going on day to day. But I'll bet Donald Trump didn't see them. Do you really think, Brian, Donald Trump woke up in the morning and greeted the maid, good morning, how are you? I hope you slept well. Do you really think he engaged his chauffeur asking, how are the kids doing? I don't envision Donald Trump being that kind of person, malignant narcissist that he is. And I'm not saying all of these Mar-a-Lago workers are excited about testifying against Donald Trump because he has probably treated them exceedingly poorly, would be my strong suspicion. But it certainly does feel like just desserts, doesn't it?
Well, the thing too about that is that these people don't have anything to gain. They don't have any skin in the game by protecting him like the more high-level staffers would, so they wouldn't have any. So we'd be more likely to see some honest testimony as opposed to the wheeling and dealing that we'll get from the John Eastmans of the world. So that's another mark in favor of honest testimony by these low-level staffers.
Absolutely.
To
Let me
that,
tell you, they may end up losing their jobs because the CNN reporting makes clear that many of them still work at Mar-a-Lago. Let me take down one other piece of BS that we see in Donald Trump's post. He says deranged Jack Smith leaked all this information about all these employees from Mar-a-Lago who are going to testify against me. That is almost certainly untrue. What people should know is that, yes, there are grand jury secrecy rules. However, the witnesses who testify in the grand jury, like the plumber and the woodworker and the maid and the chauffeur, they can talk with anyone they want about their grand jury testimony. There's an indication in the reporting that they were talking with each other about the fact that they're all being interviewed by the FBI and they're being called as witnesses before the grand jury. They talk to their lawyers talk to other people, and word gets out. So Donald Trump's claim in his unhinged rant that this was all courtesy of leaks by deranged Jack Smith, that is almost decidedly untrue.
well, Glenn, I actually want to go back and maybe possibly correct something that I just said, in the sense that, do you think that it would dissuade any of these people from cooperating properly or telling the truth because their jobs would be hanging over their heads?
I don't, the answer is yes, it could, but you know what? I have a feeling these sort of hardworking, people who have been keeping Mar-a-Lago up and running, are probably the kind of folks who are going to take seriously their responsibility when the FBI interviews them, or when they're
Right.
placed under oath before a grand jury and they have sworn to tell the truth under the penalties of perjury. And the same will hold true when they testify at trial. Listen, you can't paint with a broad brush. But I have a feeling these are folks who are going to do the right thing, even if it's hard to do.
Okay. And finally, let's end with this. Is there anything that Judge Cannon can do, and this is the Trump allied judge who we've spoken about before, who's already interfered on Trump's behalf? Is there anything that she can do here to interfere with this list of witnesses that Jack Smith is relying on?
The answer is almost certainly not. Here's why I say that. Every once in a while, a party, prosecutor or defense attorney, will try to call a witness, and that witness will have no real relevant evidence to offer. I've confronted that circumstance where a defense attorney would put somebody on the stand, and it became clear very quickly that they had nothing of relevance to the charged offenses. We would actually object and ask that the judge find that the witness should be excused without further questioning. That is an extreme circumstance. It happens from time to time. But as long as the witness has something relevant to provide, a judge cannot and ordinarily will not try to intervene and prevent that witness from testifying.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there. Obviously, a lot to cover on this trial amid the raft of other prosecutions that Trump's contending with right now. So if you want to follow along, make sure to subscribe. The links are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.